Get in, chop.
I'm a bit self-aware, sometimes it's fucked up, but life is gonna lie, so I ain't gonna slow up. I'm on a mission to change the face of mental health, kicking knowledge to my people, cause you know that health is wealth. It's your lucky day, cause you tuned into the greatest. Out here striving to survive, sometimes we fake it till we make it. If your mental health is slipping, then please don't touch that dial, go and grab a cup of tea.
Yo, what's up, you guys? It's your girl, Tree OPC, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Self-Awareness the Podcast. It's your girl, Tree. I am back for season 5. I'm really excited about this season. I'm going to be sharing a lot with you guys. One, about my personal life, but sharing with a lot of different guests that I have coming on this season. But today's episode, we are going to focus in on my personal journey with EMDR. So if you've been listening to the Self-Awareness the Podcast for any time, especially if you checked out season 4, you know that I started EMD therapy last season after I had a very special guest come on the show, LV, talk about her EMDR journey. And so a lot of things kind of was going on in my life at that time. I was still processing through the loss of my dad. And then I was really dealing with the loss of a classmate. And it really just kind of hit me really, really hard. And so I shared an episode in the fall. Make sure you guys go and check that episode out where I talk about my journey with processing through my dad's death. But today I'm going to talk a little bit more about processing through something that we don't always give attention to, and that is emotional and physical abuse. Now, many of us who grew up in the 80s, 90s, and any time before any of that stuff in the 1900s, a lot of us, we felt like it was okay for us to just beat the shit out of our kids for some reason. And so I experienced a lot of that growing up, and I've been working through reprocessing a lot of that in EMDR therapy because there's still residual impact of how these things impacted me. One of the ways that it significantly impacted me was when I was little. My aunt, who was raising me at the time, my grandmother, I was fast, like I was gone. And so like whenever I got in trouble, they couldn't catch me to whoop me. And so back in the day, like they would literally have you go outside and pick a switch off the tree, and they would sit there and tie that shit together and put rubber bands on the end of it. Like I can't make this shit up. Like they would really go and wild out with the shit that they beat us with back in the day. And so I'm not trying to get beat. So I'm over here like, all right, cool. I'm gonna outrun you. You can't fucking catch me or whatever. My cousin Lynn, she used to catch me, and I really am still hating on her to this day about that. I love my cousin Lynn to death though, but she would catch me. But when she wasn't around to catch me, I was gone. So what my aunt ended up doing is waiting until I went to sleep. And so I would be dead in the middle of my sleep. It can be 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'll get my ass beat out of my damn sleep. And I was like, you know what? This is some bullshit. It is. And back in the day, it's like, okay, this is trauma. This is really, really trauma, but we didn't call it that. At the time, it's just like, okay, I'm just beating your ass because you mad, right? So for me, what that did to me is it created insomnia for me. It made me respond to this trauma response by being afraid to go to sleep because I didn't feel safe when I was asleep, because this was the option that was chosen to be able to hold me accountable for my behavior. Now, we ain't even gonna get into the fact that the real reason why I was acting out is because I had a mom who was in prison during the first part of my years when I was a kid. And I had a dad who was not necessarily there emotionally. He was there physically in and out. And so I'm dealing with rejection. I'm dealing with abandonment. And instead of people getting me treatment and therapy at the time, they decided, hey, we're just going to beat the shit out you, right? And again, I'm not saying that they looked at it from that perspective. I don't think that that was the case at all. But that was what happened. What happened was I was dealing with shit internally and emotionally. I was acting out as a result of that internal anger. Because as kids, we don't necessarily know how to say, I'm sad. We mad. I was mad, and I was dealing with a lot of shit in life. And so one of the things that I really, really learned through EMDR reprocessing is that shit definitely lives with you, and it sticks with you until you deal with it. So the first part of me processing in this new stage of EMDR that I was working through was the image of me being in bed at night, setting my attention to go to bed, and then being in a position where I would get beat out of my sleep. And that was the image. And we worked through that particular image for a period of time, because another element of that was the fact that I would sometimes think about death at night, especially at night when I'm getting ready for bed. Typically, my wife is already in bed when it's time for me to get off work and go to bed. So I'm over there checking her, making sure she's breathing the way that I used to check and make sure my grandmother was breathing. So those are just learned responses to trauma that I had experienced. And so what I ended up having to do is reprocess through that. And that target was a little bit boring, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what I ended up coming to terms with is that my sleep was initially fucked up because of the fact that I was getting beat in my sleep as a kid. But then I recognized that it passed over into my adult life, because when I left LaGrange and I went to college, I didn't have a problem sleeping at all. I was in a new environment. I felt safe. I was in a college dorm. Everything was cool. And I slept like a baby. People would tell you, I get out from class and go take a nap before I get ready to go to the C6. And so it was fine. I was in a different environment. When I graduated college and I moved out and got my first apartment in Carrollton, and then I moved to Bowden, and then I moved to Douglasville, I was sleeping like a baby. It wasn't until I moved back to LaGrange, where all of this stuff had happened, that I was re-triggered by some of these things, and being in an abusive relationship for all those years, where if I went to sleep, this person was waking me up out of my sleep because they done went through my phone and made up some shit about what they saw on my phone and breaking phones and stuff like that or whatever. So it was never peaceful sleep in that space. And I actually ended up getting addicted to Tylenol PM at the time, because I was just trying to get anything that I could to get sleep. And so we reprocessed through my sleep shit. But again, I won't bore you with all of the details of that. It was an arduous process. And I think we ended up getting to a space where I'm still not sleeping the best without medication, but I can actually now go to sleep without medication. And again, the process of it doesn't remove it completely. It gets it to a lower level so that you're able to function. So sometimes you can get to a 0, and sometimes 1 is your 0. That's kind of what we decided on in therapy. So that was part 1 of that journey. And part 2 of the journey, that second image, was a very vivid image that I have of us when we were at 201 Vine Street. I can't tell you what I did, because I don't recall what I did in that moment to deserve this ass whooping that I was about to get. But this was a very vivid moment that I have, where I remember getting in trouble for something. And I remember jumping on the bed, and my aunt had a steel cane. And because, if you don't know this, my aunt, she was shot when she was, I think, 17 or 18 years old back in the 70s. And so she has had some mobility issues. And so she had a cane at the time. And so this lady decided it was a good idea for her to take this long fucking steel black cane and hit me on the side of my damn ankle. And I'll tell y'all, I've always come from the old school nook if you motherfucking buck. And in that moment, I had no restraint or whatever. And I'm not saying this to boast or be proud about it. I'm saying it because in that moment, I reacted and I jumped on her and pushed her to the floor. I remember this shit like it was yesterday. I can probably remember everything except for what I had on. And now that I'm talking about it, I'm kind of remembering, I think this was the incident where I threw the phone through the window. Yes, like I told you, I had some behavior issues. I wasn't a bad child, but I did have some behavior issues because I was dealing with a lot of shit that was repressed from my childhood. So that was the target image that we were working with. And then we really kind of moved from that image to really getting into the meat of the emotional side of things. Because what I realized in reprocessing and actually having a conversation with my aunt around the time that I was reprocessing, and I did not handle this conversation well. My aunt called me one random Monday. I was in the middle of doing some shit. I think I had just got out of a therapy recession with someone, and she called and she was giving me her spiel about how I was so mean to her and why I always had an attitude. And then I just let her know. I said, I always have an attitude because right now I'm in therapy. I'm processing through some shit. And the things that you did and said to me as a child, that shit hurt. Calling me bad, saying things like, that's why your parents don't want you. All of those things, they hurt me. And so I went off on her. I gave her an earful. It's probably like 30-minute conversation of me just ranting and raving. And I didn't even intend on having that conversation at that time. That was not how I wanted to have that conversation at all. But what having that conversation did for me was it allowed me to move through those things because she did own it. She did apologize for the things that she did and the things that she said. And I explained to her that, trauma works this way. It stays in your body. The memories come back. And so sometimes when I talk to you, I am triggered because I'll go back to some shit you said when I was 8 years old. So I explained that to her, and then I continued to process in therapy. But working through talking to her and then coming back and being able to actually process that in therapy after talking to her, that helped me reprocess that trigger where, okay, yeah, you were doing what you thought was best. You weren't intentionally trying to break my spirit as a child. You were trying to rear me. You were doing what people did to you, because that was one of the things that she said. I got beat. And again, I think that's just an antiquated old school way of thinking about things, because just because somebody beat the shit out of you, then that doesn't mean that you beat someone else to continue those generational patterns of abuse. And so I said to her, just as bold as I'm about to tell y'all, I was like, if you got some trauma that is not dealt with, you need to go pay a therapist to do that work. I said, but as for me, I pay a lot of fucking money to go sit in somebody's room every fucking week to be able to process through this shit. So if you got a problem with your trauma, you need to go do the fucking work. But this is my work. This is my story. This is my moment where I'm telling you how I feel. Do not make it about you and what happened to you. And she respected that. We had a couple of days where we really didn't talk. And then we started to build a bridge forward where I was able to show up for a birthday celebration that she had. I ended up working with my friend to help take her to a blues concert, after I had worked through those things that were going on mentally and emotionally with me. And right now we're in a good place. But the second part of that processing for this particular target really involved the emotional abuse that I experienced. And one of the most deeply emotional experiences that I had earlier in life was an encounter that happened when I was about 10 or 11 years old, where I had a friend. I won't say her name because this has been something that has been resolved with me and her mother as of yesterday. And so I'm not going to disclose the person. I'm not going to disclose the daughter's name at this point. Now, had I done this episode prior to working through some of these things, I probably would have. And I don't really want to highlight someone's lowest moments or the things that they did that were hurtful to me, because that is their story. This is mine. And so I had a childhood friend that was a part of this really, really big family that I was close to. And this was someone that we were cool. She was like 2 years younger than me. And around the time that I turned 10 or 11, her mom had indicated that she thought I was a bad influence. Now, mind you, again, I don't remember all the shit that I did. I did a lot of shit as a kid, and I don't excuse my behavior. It was fucked up. But at the end of the day, I was still a fucking kid. And so those child parts still had a lot of work to do as it relates to healing. And so this particular person told me that I was a bad influence and she didn't want her daughter being around me. That stuck with me throughout the rest of my life. That is something that I thought about consistently, because that was the first time someone really truly said, you're not good enough to be around this person. You don't belong. And for me, my child parts, it were hurt, because not only are you telling me that I'm not good enough, not only are you telling me that I'm bad or a bad influence, but now you're taking away a friendship. And I had that happen with another friend, but this particular one, it just hurt so bad because it broke something inside of me. And I remember my aunt standing up for me in those moments, saying all of the right things, but what was said could not be unsaid. And it stuck to me. The biggest lie I think that adults used to tell kids, I don't think we still tell kids this these days, but is that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me or they can't harm me. And that is a motherfucking lie from the pits of hell. Those words hurt me for so long. I'm sitting here today, 43 years old, and those words have hurt me over the last 30 plus years. My child parts cried every time I thought about being told that I wasn't a good influence on someone and losing a friend. And so I was reprocessing this, and y'all, the level of tears, the level of hurt, the visceral response that my body had to this, it was very telling because it let me know how deeply rooted this thing was. And so I was processing for several weeks. I ended up putting a Facebook post out there like, hey, do you think you deserve the right to be able to confront someone that hurt you as a kid? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? And I had a lot of people weigh in and give different decisions about like what they would do or if it was okay to confront someone that hurt you. And I went back and forth with that. And I wrote out this message that I wanted to say, and I processed it in therapy. And y'all know I see two therapists. I see my EMDR therapist and I see my regular therapist. So I'm therapied the fuck out most of the time, but it's a good thing because it makes me look at things in a very different way. And so I was processing this with Alex, and she was like, I think that's a good start. You really kind of said it. It's clear, and she was like, are you going to send it? And I was like, no, this is like March of this year. And I was like, no, I don't think I'm ready to send something yet because, I don't know how it's going to be received. I'm afraid, and I felt safe. I've always felt safe with Alex to just be 100% myself. And that's not to say that I don't feel safe with my EMDR therapist. But what it is to say is that this person is someone that has been in my life for 6-7 years at this point. And so I don't, fear judgment with them in any type of way. So I was like, yeah, I'm a little bit afraid if that would be more harmful to me than it'll do good to me. And so I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'm going to continue to process with Kashawn and see where things go. And so we were talking about it. And I was like, okay, cool. So I continue to go in, I continue to reprocess. I continue to just break down in tears every single week after week. I'm just crying my eyes out. I'm going ahead and grabbing the tissue box right when she hands me the tappers because I am just like, you know what? This shit is deep and we got to get this shit out. And so we're reprocessing. And so finally this past week, I went in and we're processing. And I told her, I said, you know what? Like, as I'm processing this and I'm thinking about like my adult me versus child me, I said, I really think that child me needs adult me to stand up for her. I was like, as a child, I feel like nobody stood up for me. People just accepted the fact that, oh, well, she's just bad, or, oh, she's not good enough. These things that I kind of internalized and they became a part of my core belief system. And so I'm talking through this and I'm like, adult me don't give a fuck. Say that shit with your whole motherfucking chest. But child me, like when I just think about it, I was in fucking tears. And I said, that little girl needs somebody to stand up for her. Little tree needs a voice. And so what I ended up doing in that is I ended up posting this thing on social media where I just let it all hang out. I was vulnerable. I was open. And I was like, I'm fucking terrified. The little girl in me is terrified that I'll be rejected, that I'll be ridiculed, and that I'll be made fun of. Because again, this is someone that's from a family that I felt a part of as a kid. Like this was a really, really big family. I really, I love them. And I was like, I don't want these people looking at me a different way as an adult or being like, oh, you should get over that shit because it was so long ago. I was fearful. And again, I don't know what was said after I sent the message, but I put it out there because I wanted to be able to document it for myself. And I was like, right after I post this shit, I'm going to send this message. I maybe added like one line at the end. I sent it. And within 5 to 7 minutes, I got a response back from the person. And they said, I don't remember doing this, but if I did, I'm sorry. I've never intended to hurt you. And that kind of, I'm not trying to be crying on this shit, but that kind of like really emotionally allowed me to release. And I remember before I actually saw her message or anything, I remember writing one of my friends at work and I was like, I'm about to text you, like I'm dealing with some shit, right? And so I texted her and I told her what I was dealing with. And I went in the bathroom and I just sat on that motherfucking toilet and I ain't have to do shit with pee, but I cried from the depths of my fucking soul. I let all of that shit out. After I see it said, I just went and I let it all come out. And it was the most cathartic fucking cry that I had. Cause I be in EMDR crying my ass off. Don't mind you. Like I be in there sniffling and shit. But it's something about when your soul motherfucking cries. I think Jay-Z got a damn song talking about the cry. It might probably, I don't know. Anyway, song cry. Here's a song cry. But the soul crying out, my soul cried out. And I let that shit out. I was like, you know what? When I get up off this goddamn toilet seat, regardless of what she says, regardless of whatever, I know I stood up for little Tree and she got to be heard today regardless, right? But she did respond within 5 to 7 minutes and she did acknowledge the hurt. She didn't invalidate my feelings. And for the little girl who lives on the inside of me, I feel like finally she can release that and she can stand tall and say, you know what? You've already done the work, Big Tree. You've proved that you're not a bad influence. In fact, you influence others to work on themselves. You created a business, a podcast, journals. You created all of this stuff to do good and be good, but you don't need that shit anymore to prove that you are good, that you are worthy. You don't need that anymore. Your work with that chapter is done. You vindicated me. You stood up for me. You used your voice as an adult to say the shit that I couldn't say as Lil Tree. Lil Tree don't need to be fucking cussing. Girl, shut your goddamn bad ass up. Anyway, but she has a voice. She had a voice yesterday when this was expressed. And so I'm grateful that the response was what it was. Now I got a little bit more work to do with this particular one before we close it out because it'll be closed out by the time this airs. But a little bit more work still has to be done with this in order for me to close out this section of my processing because people said some wild ass shit to me as a kid. I don't know why they were so emboldened to be able to do that. And I think it was because I didn't have people that they felt were strong enough to stand up to them. I had a grandmother who was in her 60s. I had an aunt who was a paraplegic and dealing with, mobility issues and things and was looked at a certain type of way. So maybe I didn't come from the best family dynamics of what people would look for, but I was still a fucking kid. I was still a person that showed up, that went to school, got fucking all A's. People used to say all the time, in school, you were a fucking angel. When you got off that bus, it was hell to fucking pay. But she was hurt. And now she is fucking healing. And it is a beautiful fucking journey. Because now she gets to work through that shit so that this version of me can be the best version of me. I feel like I'm channeling my inner Marcia. Shout out to my girl, Marcia Blaine. I feel like I'm channeling her right now because she's all about empowerment and growth. And I can't wait for her to come on this season because we're going to get into some shit like we always do. But now I feel like, you know what? Hold your head up. You are worthy. And if you are listening to this and any of this resonates with you, if anybody has ever counted you out, if they've ever said you're not good enough, you're not big enough, you don't come from the right family tree. If they ever said any of that shit to you, I want you to look them dead in their eye. I want you to tell them, you got me fucked up. I am greater than you think. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And maybe last night as I was journaling about this whole thing, the scripture that came up at the bottom of my journal, I have a journal that I use that has scriptures at the bottom of it, was that his strength is made perfect in my weakness. But the other part of that thing was the joy of the Lord is my strength. And I think sometimes when we get caught up in our own stuff, sometimes we can miss that. And again, you ain't got to be super religious or dumb deep. That's part of my journey, because my thing is God has brought me through so much. My testimony is ridiculous, the things that he has brought me through. But one thing I cannot deny is that it is his grace and his mercy that has brought me through this. You can be dumb deep if you want to, baby. But one thing I'm going to tell you like this is I have Jesus and I have two very good therapists that have helped me walk this thing on out. And I'm going to continue to walk it out because I know that there is nothing too hard for God. And so as I navigate through this journey, as I learn to continue to stand up for myself, God is continuing to be in the midst. So I closed my night out last night as I had the victory and declared the victory. I closed it out with some worship, because to him belongs all the glory and honor. The therapist helped me. I do the part where I show up, and God, he is always in the midst. So I closed out last night with one of my favorite worship songs by Lisa McClendon, You Are Holy, because I had to invite God back into this space, because it is with him that I live, move, and have my being. And it's with him. And he is the reason that I continue to show up. So whatever your case is, whatever you are dealing with, I encourage you. And this ain't even using the way that I go with this, but I have to be led by the Holy Spirit that lives within me, because I am greater than all of the things that came against me. And I am standing in my truth. I am standing in my legacy. I will declare and decree that I will change the face of mental health and how we navigate it through this podcast and through my life. Baby, without the vulnerability, none of this shit is possible. So I appreciate y'all listening today. I appreciate you allowing me to continue to come into your ear gates every single week as we navigate through this thing called life together. So y'all keep on listening, keep tuning in. I'll be sharing more about my journey, and I'm really, really excited for this season. So make sure that you guys follow me, Tree the LPC, on all social media platforms under the handle Tree the LPC. Until next time, be safe, be well, and make sure that you take care of your mental health.
I'm a bit self-aware, sometimes it's fucked up, but life is gonna lie, so I ain't gonna slow up. I'm on a mission to change the face of mental health, kicking knowledge to my people, cause you know that health is wealth. It's your lucky